Thank you, choir. Thank you for bringing your blessing of music to us today and to this sanctuary on our day of Sabbath. This day we remember who truly has a claim on our lives and who does not. The day on which we remember that we have been liberated from the bonds of sin, from the chains of powers and principalities which seek to define our lives, and once again, the image of God in which we have been created is being restored in our lives, even now. Thank you for being here, friends. Thank you for allowing me to witness God's glory being transformed in your life and in mine from one degree to another this Sabbath day. Have you ever heard that old bumper sticker slogan that says, "Lord, protect me from your followers"? I swear Jesus was probably the first one to say that. You think about how the religious of Jesus' day sought to tear him down, sought to break Jesus, sought to redefine Jesus, sought to control Jesus, sought to limit Jesus. In the end, I imagine it was the religious who killed Jesus. Those who sought to be more religious than faithful. Think about it. Jesus encountered a lot of very religious folks throughout his ministry. People who were far more interested in practicing the law than they were in living their life in faith. Jesus encountered a whole lot of people who found it easier to uphold the 613 laws of Moses contained in the Torah than they did to love God with all their heart, their soul, their mind, their strength, and more importantly, love their neighbor as themselves. They just found it easier to practice the religion, to wear the mask of religion, to cloak themselves in the garb of religion, to uphold the doctrine of religion, than they did to care for their neighbor in need. Now, I'm not saying religion is bad per se. In fact, religion is a very good thing. It's the vehicle through which our faith moves closer and closer to God. It is the strength which supports our faith and leads us into actions of compassion and caring. But when religion becomes the religion, when we start to worship the religion over and above God, I think we've gone off course. Take a look at the 13th chapter of Luke's Gospel, which I shared with you today. Jesus is preaching in the synagogue, likely his home synagogue. He's in Nazareth, likely the very same synagogue that Jesus was chased out of earlier. You remember, for proclaiming the day of the Lord and its fulfillment in him. They tried to run Jesus out of town. Well, here he is back again, teaching and preaching in their synagogue, and in walks a woman who is crippled over with some sort of back ailment. The scripture says she has a spirit. She hobbles in, maybe from the 21st century, we might say maybe she had osteoporosis for 18 years. Maybe she was just tired from carrying the weight of being a widow in a day and age where widows had no rights. Maybe she was carrying the burdens of being unemployed. Maybe she was carrying the burdens of poverty, of isolation, of being ostracized from the people of God. Maybe even though she was hunched over and hobbling, she was coming into that sanctuary indignant because the people of God, the religious, had cut her off from God. We can only hypothesize. But we do know she hobbled in that day while Jesus was preaching. Now, some might have wanted to shoo her away. Some might have wanted to hush her, maybe the way some of us felt when we heard a baby crying. I couldn't time that better. Maybe they were uncomfortable by her ailment. We don't know. Luke doesn't say. But Luke is a physician. He does recognize this woman is physically impaired. And as Jesus preaches, she walks into the synagogue, and Jesus calls her over, and he says to her, "Woman, thou art loosed. Woman, you are free from your ailment. Woman, your affliction will leave you now." And after Jesus speaks, perhaps when the service is over and he's greeting in the church, he lays his hand on her and she stands upright. She stands upright for the first time in 18 years. She stands upright in the house of God, in the presence of Jesus Christ. It shouldn't be surprising to any of us. We remember Jesus' call to all of us to lift up our heads, he says, for our redemption is drawing near. And now in the presence of God, she is able to stand upright. She's able to lift her head up and be in direct relationship with God and Jesus Christ. No wonder she starts praising God. But what happens? What happens? The religious in the congregation, the religious leader of the synagogue, gets his knickers in a twist, so to speak. He's offended that this one Jesus would come in and heal this one who's been oppressed all these years. Perhaps his ego can't take it. I've been there when you go away on vacation and they have a guest preacher and you come back and people are going, "Wow, that guest preacher was fantastic. Wow, you need to take more time off, Dr. Mark." I know how the ego of a religious leader can be challenged when somebody brings on a new show. Well, this one let his ego get the better of him. And so he threw the book at Jesus. He threw the book, the Torah, the 613 laws of Moses. He threw it at Jesus in front of all those people gathered there in the synagogue. He said, "Jesus, there are 6 days on which you may heal the sick. But on the 7th, we are to rest. The 7th is the Sabbath, Jesus." Shame. You should know better, Jesus. You shouldn't have healed this woman on the Sabbath. Well, Jesus has an issue with those who are pietistic, those who are legalistic, those who are overly religious. He calls him and those who follow him hypocrites. "You hypocrites," he says. "You religious leaders, you synagogue leaders, you're willing to untie your ox and your ass and lead them to water that they might drink on the Sabbath, that they might not experience dehydration on the Sabbath. How dare you care more for your animals than the life of this human being? How dare you let the law, how dare you let your religion stand in the way of your compassion?" Jesus was not going to stand for someone throwing the law at him, throwing the book at him. Jesus would not tolerate religion standing in the way of compassion.